It is finally time to find out who is the most exciting fighter in the UFC, and I've got a tier list video today to try and help me get to the bottom of it. I'm going to be using this tier list, as you can see on the screen right now. We've got a bunch of different tiers, S, A, B, C, D, S being the best, D being the worst, and I've got all of the fighters that I felt like needed to be a part of this conversation hidden around the perimeter of the screen, and I'll slowly reveal them and place them where I believe they belong on the screen in their own respective tier as the video goes on, and hopefully by the end of this video we'll have a bit of a rough understanding over who's the most exciting fighter in the UFC and where each of the exciting fighters rank and stack up against each other in comparison to each other. And I also want to mention this: everyone on this list is going to be an exciting fighter, okay? I'm not saying that the people in D tier are completely boring. I can still find entertainment value, and a lot of it, in the people that are going to be on the D tier section of this list. However, we've got a bunch of exciting fighters. I need to find out who is the most exciting, and there's only one way to do that, and that's with ruthless criticism. Let's start straight away. I've tried to base this around the rankings, just to keep it a little bit minimalized. I've tried to focus on the most exciting fighters in the rankings, up and down the rankings. I've tried to include a couple of fighters that are outside the rankings, the ones that I feel like definitely need to be a part of this conversation, regardless of being ranked or not. Let's start straight away with a random fighter, which is going to be Kamaru Usman. Now, this is an interesting one to start with because I actually feel like Kamaru Usman belongs right here in the B tier section. I think Usman, at one point in his career, was all the way around here, okay? And that was a very obvious thing. Don't get me wrong, he had some entertaining fights, some good finishes over Sergio Moraes, and also a good performance, I believe, against Rafael dos Anjos. A lot of people gave him a bit of smack for that, but I thought the Rafael dos Anjos performance was a great performance by Kamaru Usman. He had a couple of stinkers, but then, recently, 3 of his last 4 fights, other than when he held Masvidal against a cage when Masvidal took it on short notice, which is going to hold him back from the A-tier section right now, war with Covington, an amazing fight, amazing scrap, a great entertaining fight with Gilbert Burns, where he got a finish in the second round, and a one-punch KO in the rematch against Masvidal. I'm putting Usman at B-tier, maybe another amazing fight he can end up around this area, who knows, but for right now, I'm still got a sour taste in my mouth from his previous fights. Usman at B tier. Moving on to someone else in the video who's going to be Pedro Munhoz. I'm actually going to put Pedro Munhoz in the A-tier section of this video. I feel like Pedro Munhoz is one of the more entertaining fighters in the UFC. I will challenge you to go and find a boring Pedro Munhoz fight. The style that he has literally doesn't make it possible for him to have a boring fight. Now, is he in crazy wars where you can't believe what you've just seen and you're just so over the moon over the fight that's going on that you just can't contain yourself? Not really, so he's holding himself back from the S-tier section there. But overall, Pedro Munhoz never fails to entertain. I'm putting him at A tier. Moving on to someone else. Let's speed this up. We've got Tony Ferguson. Another person in the A tier section now. At one point in Tony Ferguson's career, he would have been in the S tier section of this video. However, recently, he's kind of just been held on the ground for 15 fucking minutes over and over again. And I think that has to degrade him from the S tier level to the A tier level, because there's other fighters on this list where if they're going to lose a fight, they're going to go down swinging and scrapping and making sure, even in a loss, that they've given their all and made it as entertaining as possible. Tony Ferguson, I think after his last few performances, slipped down to the A tier, but overall, Tony Ferguson, wickedly entertaining fighter. Moving on to someone else on the list who's going to be Leon Edwards. Now, as I said at the start of this video, even people in D tier can be somewhat entertaining. I find entertainment value in watching Leon Edwards fights. I know it sounds crazy, but I genuinely do. I like the sport. I like what he does. It's very technical, very good. There just seems to be an absence in Leon Edwards' mind over how entertaining he should be in there. He will be presented a golden opportunity at a finish, and he will simply refuse to do so because it will mean adding extra risk, and in all honesty, it may be backfired against Nate Diaz. If he would have maybe poured on a bit more pressure in rounds 2 or 3 against Nate Diaz, he wouldn't have maybe had the end of that round 5. Either way, Leon Edwards, entertainment is the last thing on his mind when he's in there in the cage, and he tends to have really slow-paced, low-output bouts. I'm going to put Leon Edwards in the D-tier section. Moving on to someone else in this video who is Ciryl Gane. I'm going to put Ciryl Gane at C for Ciryl. I think he's going to go out there every single time, have a bit of a stinker now and again, don't get me wrong. Like, the Rosenstruik fight was pretty bad, but Rosenstruik literally just refused to engage the entire way through. But Ciryl Gane has some entertaining bouts, and if there is a finish presented to him, he will go for it, and that will involve throwing flying knees in the heavyweight division. I think Ciryl Gane is a great fighter. Not the most entertaining at times, which is going to hold him back from these other areas, but I think when he sees finishes, he goes for them. Even against Dontel Mays, he went for that heel hook at the end of the 3rd round. Could have just went to a decision. That's what Leon Edwards would have done. He wouldn't have been pulling heel hooks, putting himself on bottom with 10 seconds to go in a fight that he's dominating and winning. Ciryl Gane is very entertaining to watch. Slightly more entertaining than Leon Edwards, in my opinion, but not quite on the level of the other guys. I'm putting him at C tier. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Cory the Sandman Sandhagen. I'm putting Cory Sandhagen at A tier. I think he has to be there. He's got great scraps in his career, really good performances up and down his career. I like Cory Sandhagen. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, and I don't think he gets enough credit for this, he got a wheel kick finish, then a flying knee finish, back-to-back against top 5 contenders. I know Edgar didn't beat Munhoz, so he shouldn't have even been in the top 5. We all know that was the worst robbery of all time. Either way, Cory Sandhagen wheel kicks Marlon Moraes. Next card, flying knees Frankie Edgar in the 1st round. He's got great finishes in his career as well. He has another flying knee finish over Mario Batista in his career. He's got submission finishes, I believe. One of them, maybe, I'm not even too sure. He's got a body shot finish against Austin Arnett, which I thought was great. He just had a war with TJ Dillashaw. I think it's fair to say Cory Sandhagen is always going to entertain very consistently and have a chance at some spectacular finishes. I'm putting him at A tier. Cory Sandhagen belongs there. Moving on to someone else in the video who's going to be Colby Covington. B tier for Colby Covington. I know his Woodley fight wasn't the most entertaining, but he very clearly had a game plan to go out there, see what Woodley was going to do in the early rounds, and then put on the pressure in the later rounds once he got on top and had Woodley a little bit more tired. But typically, I like Colby Covington's fight style, okay? And I think he's actually been... It's so weird to me how Dana White, out of all of the fighters that we've had in the UFC... If Colby's story is real about them wanting to cut him, win or lose against Damian Maia, it makes no sense because he actually had some entertaining scraps. The volume, the pressure. I liked everything about Covington's fight style. The Lawler fight was great. He just steamrolled him, kept putting on volume. He was throwing fucking tornado kicks into spinning back fists at the very end of a 5-round war with Robbie Lawler when he knows Lawler's going to be looking for a big finish. He's a dangerous guy. I like Colby Covington. Not quite enough to put him in the A or S tier section. I think he's more overall entertaining than Kamaru Usman in his bouts, but Usman's got that ability to like shut someone's lights off, which kind of makes up for it. So I think they're around the same area. I thought the RDA fight was good. I think Colby's had a lot of good fights, including his one against Usman. Moving on to someone else on this list who's going to be Dan the Hangman Hooker. I'm putting him... Yeesh! I'm going to put him at B tier, I think. I'm going to hold back from the A tier section. Don't get me wrong, when you think about Dan Hooker's fights, you think about some of the amazing finishes that he's had, some of the wars that he's had throughout his career. He's not great. Like, there are some fights that he has, like the Ally Quinta fight in his career, where it's a little bit of a slower pace. He does have his moments, but he can cruise to a decision win if he wants to. He has other fights like that in his career. Maybe I'll move him up to A tier towards the end, but he just got shut out by Michael Chandler. Don't get me wrong, that's a little bit skewed to base that on how entertaining he is, because he got KO'd in the 1st round. I understand. I'm still going to put Dan Hooker at B tier, because he doesn't really go crazy with fights, and even if he does have some really good rounds, his survivability makes his fights interesting. Against Paul Felder, the most interesting parts of that fight, in the rounds where it was interesting, was round 4, where Paul Felder beat the shit out of Dan Hooker, and Hooker just accepted it and took it. Maybe that's to do with Dan Hooker and his toughness that makes him entertaining, but either way, even against another fight that he had with Edson Barboza, it was his ability to take punishment that made it entertaining. I don't think it's Dan Hooker specifically doing some crazy matrix shit out there, like these guys up here, and doing some crazy combinations, walking guys down and just beating the fuck out of them for 3 straight rounds. Don't typically see Dan Hooker do that. A lot of the fights that he's in, even the Dustin Poirier one, had a good first 2 rounds. The last 3 rounds was only entertaining because Poirier was beating the shit out of him a little bit, landing some great shots on a gassed out Dan Hooker. I'm putting him at B tier. Moving on to someone else in this video who is Brandon Moreno is going to go at A tier. I love watching him fight, man. I think Brandon Moreno belongs in the A tier section of this video. Great scraps throughout his career. Great war with Davison Figueiredo. Even his fight with Formiga was reasonably fun. I like his attitude in the cage. He had a great scrap with Kai Kara France. A decent fight with Askar Askarov as well, by the way. And that's Askar Askarov, a guy who literally just wants to half-guard simulator you for the entire fucking fight long. Moreno made that fight somehow entertaining. I'm putting Brandon Moreno in the A tier section. He's just consistently entertaining at all times, but maybe that's just a flyweight thing, who knows. Brandon Moreno's in the A tier for Assassin Baby, perhaps. Moving on to someone else in this video who's going to be Cody Garbrandt. I'm putting him at C tier. I don't think he's that exciting. Listen, he had that one good performance against Dominic Cruz, but other than that, listen. And listen. He gets finished in the first round. That's not on him. He does make it exciting, don't get me wrong, but he's the one getting finished. That's why it's, wow, it's not like Cody Garbrandt's doing too much of the finishing nowadays. And even when he does do the finishing, against Rafael Assunção, that fight before the very end, before that 1 second of entertainment, the fight he had with Rafael Assunção was a fucking snoozer. I'm putting Cody Garbrandt at C tier. He's consistent. He does have finishes, but I'm just never wowed by something, and I haven't been other than his fight against Dominic Cruz. Especially recently, I feel like that's what I'm going to have to base it on. The same thing I did with Tony Ferguson. Listen, if this was Cody Garbrandt before all of his losses and his recent streak of losses that he's had, I'd probably put him around the A tier section, the B tier section between it. Like I'd put Ferguson at S tier maybe. Other than that, I think he's drowned himself a little bit with his recent losses. Hasn't had the best of performances. I know he had a decent scrap with Rob Font, but that was just Rob Font beating the shit out of him. I'm putting Cody Garbrandt at C tier. Moving on to someone else who is Francis Ngannou. B tier for Francis Ngannou. I know it's crazy, guys. I really do understand that, but I'm a guy, listen. I don't really like knockouts. Like, don't get me wrong, knockouts are cool and everything, and, like, keep getting them, UFC fighters. They're really good highlights. I kind of feel robbed when I watch a knockout. I want, like, fun, great, whoa, every 10 seconds there's, like, a crazy moment. You know what I mean? Or someone enters the Matrix every other 5 seconds. Like, with Ngannou, it's either really patient until an inevitable end. He has the Derrick Lewis fight on his resume, and purely because of that, I'm maybe considering dragging him lower, but I'll leave him at B tier. The Derrick Lewis fight that he had wasn't the best. Listen, I know people big up the Stipe Miocic and Ngannou fight, but outside of the first round, that was really kind of shit as well. I'm going to go with Francis Ngannou at B tier. I like KOs. He's definitely exciting. It's just for me, I'm looking for something different. I'm looking for these guys. Scraps. Great scraps where they're putting it on people and they're just out there styling on everyone. But I'm going to put him at B tier. Maybe he can move up later in the video. We'll see. Moving on to someone else on this list who's going to be Bobby Knuckles Robert Whittaker. I'm going to put Robert Whittaker at B tier here. I like Robert Whittaker's style. Sometimes he can be a little bit more patient. He's had a couple of fights where it wasn't so entertaining in his career. He's had a couple of fights where he hasn't really gone to war. Like against Romero, the war was the fact that Romero dropped him in certain moments of that fight, and that's what made it entertaining. But Robert Whittaker is definitely in the mix here for being an entertaining fighter. He's got a great style. It's maybe not going to blow your hair back, but it's going to be a consistently enjoyable experience as the fight goes on. Every single time he's out there. Doesn't really get the finishes anymore that maybe he once did, but he's always entertaining. I'm putting him at B tier, and I like Robert Whittaker's style. It's always fun to watch. It's just not crazy to watch. Do you understand? The Darren Till fight was good. Good to watch. Not crazy entertaining. You look at the Jared Cannonier fight. Good fight to watch. Not crazy entertaining. I'm going to put Robert Whittaker at B tier. Moving on to someone else who is Jose Aldo Jr. We're going B tier as well. Consistently entertaining. That's all it is. Nothing too crazy. Not too many wars back and forth where it's like something you've never seen before in your life. But good, entertaining fighter. Every single time he's out there, he's going to give you some form of entertainment. I'm putting Jose Aldo at B tier. Sometimes he does have some stinkers when he's not getting his own way. Against Alexander Volkanovski, he kind of just realized he couldn't do anything on the feet to Alexander Volkanovski and just shelled up against the cage, really, and didn't really do anything about it. I feel like Jose Aldo belongs at B tier. Good, fun fights. Sometimes they can be a little bit stinky. The Marlon Vera fight wasn't the best fight. It was a good performance, just consistently entertaining. Nothing too crazy that's going to blow your hair back. I'm putting Jose Aldo at B tier. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Jon Jones. We're putting him at D tier. I don't care what you say about this decision. What has Jon Jones done in a fight recently other than oblique kick and jab and lead hook someone? And clinch them and fail to take them down? His Anthony Smith fight was a stinker. It ruined the whole card. His Thiago Santos fight was a stinker. It deaded the card. His fight with Dominic Reyes was fun because he got his ass whooped for 3 rounds. Other than that, he literally just plods forward, throws oblique kicks, and flicks out jabs and lead hooks, and literally does nothing else in fights whatsoever. I mean, the one time I saw him throw anything crazy was when he illegally kneed Anthony Smith. Either way, Jon Jones doesn't really have too entertaining of fights. Does have some finishes here and there, like he did have a finish against Gustafsson. I'm not counting fights where a guy got banned for steroids. I know people like to bring up, oh, the head kick against DC. It's a no contest. Never fucking happened. He's on roids, no contest. We're going to start bringing up other fights where fighters are blatantly cheated, like, oh, see what Lesnar did to Mark Hunt? Like, no, we're not going to do that. But Jon Jones, boring fighter, doesn't really do anything in there. It's been a while since I've been wowed by a Jon Jones performance. It's been about 5 years, in all honesty. The Gustafsson fight, he got a finish. Before then, nothing at all, just little flicky shots, oblique kicks, groin-shotted Gustafsson really brutally. As soon as they restarted, he took down Gustafsson. That's what happened. Moving on to someone else on the list who's going to be Conor McGregor. I'm putting him at A tier. Conor McGregor belongs at A tier, most definitely. One of the more entertaining fighters in the octagon. Sometimes he does have a few stinkers where maybe it's not going his own way and he does shell up a little bit and he does maybe not give that warrior spirit to grit down and throw like crazy when he needs to, like against Poirier. Kind of shelled up, took the punishment, went down. The second time I'm talking about, not when he broke his leg. I'm not going to pile on for that. It's a leg break. Like, that'd be like piling on Weidman for the Uriah Hall loss. And Uriah Hall checked that kick. Like, imagine if that was consistent with everyone's reactions to leg breaks. Either way, Conor McGregor doesn't really have that grit to sit there and go, come on then, and start swinging back and forth. Kind of doesn't like it when things start not going his way. Shells up a little bit, but consistently entertaining every single fight. He's going to go out there, he's going to take a while off and then come in there and spin him back kick Poirier in the first fucking round, even though he's coming off a KO loss. Conor McGregor, one of the more entertaining fighters in UFC history. Performance against Alvarez, magical performance. Other than recently, I might have put him at S tier, but I think Conor McGregor, his whole thing is the entertainment value. It always has been. I'm putting Conor McGregor at A tier. Moving on to someone else on this list who's going to be Paulo Costa. I think I'm going to go A tier. I'm not going to judge him based on that one Israel Adesanya fight, and I'll tell you this. Maybe he would have been S tier without the Adesanya fight, because people forget what Paulo Costa did. And I know he keeps talking about the fact that he's going to be sober this time and no one likes it and people are piling on him. Even though he's blatantly memeing, people are like taking him, speaking another language, and they're taking everything he says literally so they can insult him for it. Even though they know he's probably trolling about the whole wine thing and how he's going to be sober next time. I think he's just memeing about the whole thing. Either way, you can't deny what Paulo Costa did against Yoel Romero. Walked down Yoel Romero. Walked him down. And just put it on him in those first 2 rounds. Yoel Romero had good moments as well, don't get me wrong. But Paulo Costa walked down Yoel Romero, put it on him, and every fight before that was just termination. I'm walking you down, I'm destroying you, I'm the middleweight Jiri Prochazka. We'll see how Jiri's title shot goes. Hopefully it doesn't go how Costa's did. Either way, I'm putting him at A tier. Always entertaining, other than one few fights here and there. Moving on to another fighter on this list who's going to be Edson Barboza. Consistently entertaining. Couple of fights here and there that don't quite live up to that crazy factor in his career, but Edson Barboza, every single time he goes out there, is crazily entertaining. I'm looking forward to him every single time he goes out there. I kind of want to put him at S tier, but he's had a couple of stinkers in his career where maybe it hasn't been so high pace and he's easily been able to beat someone and they just don't really want to engage with him, or maybe he goes out there and just gets taken down over and over and it's just him getting his ass whooped for 5 rounds. This is really going to benefit people who don't really lose too often. Either way, Edson Barboza, putting him at A tier, always entertaining. I'll always tune into him fighting. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Shane Burgos, a former opponent of Edson Barboza. I'm putting him at S tier. Shane Burgos might be the most entertaining fighter on the fucking roster. There is not a single fight that isn't crazy with him. every single fight he has had in his career, I feel like. He had a Godfredo El Pepe, amazing scrap that he had with him. He had another amazing fight, I believe it was with Calvin Kattar. Got finished in that one, but again, that was a bit of a weird stoppage. And also, he was doing really good in that fight as well. Looking really good in there, having a great scrap with Calvin Kattar. Great scrap with Makwan Amirkhani, ended up getting a finish in the 3rd round. Great war with Josh Emmett, one of the best fights you'll ever see in your life. Great scrap with Josh Emmett, again, against Edson Barboza. He's so entertaining, his brain has to go, listen, we know you're trying to please the crowd, but we're going to have to shut this off. We know you haven't just taken a punch, but it's too much. You're too entertaining. We have to shut you down in the middle of a fucking performance. You've used up all of your volume points, basically. Shane Burgos, one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC, definitely deserves his spot in the S tier section. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Aljamain Sterling. I'm not going to put him at D tier. I'm putting Aljamain Sterling at C tier. You want to know why? He's actually kind of entertaining sometimes. I know that sometimes he has performances where he's just sort of grinding on people and failing takedowns against Yan, and it's not the most entertaining to watch him do it. But either way, he's actually pretty entertaining. I like watching Aljo fight. He's got high output, high volume. Does have some stinkers here and there that aren't too entertaining. Don't get me wrong, with some stalemates. I know his fight against the Sun Sao was a very slow-paced fight where not really anything happened out there. I thought he won that one. I thought it was a brutal robbery. Either way, Aljamain Sterling, C tier section. People would want me to put him in D tier, but he's actually got some decent entertaining scraps. I'll watch him fight. He's very good. C tier for Aljamain Sterling. Moving on to Charles Oliveira. I'm putting Charles Oliveira in the B tier section. You kind of have to. He's kind of up there. He's not quite going to do anything too crazy. And he did have a bit of a stinker against Tony Ferguson. You know what? I might drag him down. But either way, Charles Oliveira, his finishing rate is ridiculous. So there's going to be entertaining bouts. It's just he does it against Daniel Tamer and Nick Lentz for the 5th time. Like, I understand Charles Oliveira's got a high finishing rate. His fights in the meantime are nothing crazy. Like, it's not ever going to be like a ridiculous war. His fight with Chandler was very good. I'm going to put him at B tier. Good finishing potential. Good excitement in his fights. Good combinations. I'm putting him at B. Moving on to someone else who is Justin Gaethje. We're going A tier for Gaethje. Recently, a lot more of a patient style than usual. Had a bit of a embarrassing showing against Khabib, let's be real. But I'm putting Justin Gaethje at A tier, man. Always brings it. The human highlight reel. Great scraps earlier on in his career against Alvarez, Poirier, but sometimes slows it down a bit, especially recently. I think we're going to see a way more patient version of Gaethje that isn't as exciting as maybe he once was. But I'm putting Justin Gaethje at A tier. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Vicente Luque. I'm putting Vicente Luque at S tier. There is not a single fight in his entire career where he's fought boring. If he is behind on the scorecards, he will risk being KO'd to go out there and make it exciting against Brian Barberena. He is being peppered up in that fight. He may have had staph infection or something because he really badly gassed out in that fight as it went on, and he doesn't usually do that. Getting peppered up, nose smashed in against Brian Barberena. He goes, fuck this. I ain't fucking losing. I'm walking this motherfucker down. I'm beating the shit out of him. And that's what he did in the 3rd round. Vicente Luque finished Woodley in the 1st round. Vicente Luque made a Michael Chiesa fight entertaining. He's S tier. End of conversation. Moving on to someone else. Nate Diaz. C tier for Nate Diaz. Good fights, but, you know, C tier for Nate Diaz. Nothing too crazy, nothing too wild anyway. Michael Johnson fight was pretty good fight, pretty good entertainment levels. Masvidal fight, he got his ass handed to him for 3 straight rounds, did basically nothing there but get shit kicked out of him completely. Against Leon Edwards again, got shit kicked out of him for 24 minutes. I know people act like he won that Edwards fight. We know what we saw. We saw Edwards toy with another grown man for four rounds and 4 minutes. And Nate Diaz just accepted it the entire time, walking away from Leon Edwards, pointing his ass out in the direction of Leon Edwards, hands on his knees, looking away like over his shoulder at Edwards with his ass pointed at him like a real BMF. Nate Diaz, very fun to watch, always going to be exciting. Just, you know, I'm just not a big fan of the whole, like, clinch him up against a cage, like Pettis, like he did with Pettis. Good fight with Pettis, though. Entertaining scrap. He just doesn't really do anything too crazy to me. Good fight with Conor McGregor in the rematch, but if Nate Diaz is losing, It's just him being embarrassed and taking a one-sided ass whooping. So I'm putting him at C tier. He has some fights where it's just like, come on, like, can we just go for something here instead of walking around the edge of the cage, pointing at someone and pointing your ass at them and bending over and looking over your shoulder. Like, I just want to scrap and some entertainment value, and it feels like when Nate Diaz realizes he's outmatched, he just sort of hides around the edge of the octagon and points his ass at his opponent. I'm putting Nate Diaz in C tier. Moving on to someone else who's going to be TJ Dillashaw. I'm putting Dillashaw at A tier. Couple of stinkers that can get a little bit patient, a little bit too technical for some people's liking, but honestly, always entertaining, always going to put on a great fight. His fight against Sandhagen was great. Great finishing potential as well. Well, we don't know yet, but I hope the finishing potential is still going to be there. He does have some fights where he takes it a little bit more patiently, a little bit more effectively. Like the John Lineker fight was entertaining, but it wasn't like a war or a scrap or a blowout performance like the Renan Barão performances were. Same thing with Rafael Assunção both times. Very technical matchups that weren't too crazy of a war each time. But overall, in terms of consistency, Dillashaw always puts on a reasonably entertaining fight and sometimes puts on great performances that you can't even believe your eyes while you're watching. Dillashaw belongs at A tier. Moving on to someone else who is Jan Blachowicz. I'm putting him at C tier. Decently entertaining. If he doesn't get a KO, it gets a bit slow. And I like Jan Blachowicz. I'm a big fan. I watched him tool Israel Adesanya for 5 straight rounds and win all 5. But Jan Blachowicz, very good, but it just seems if it goes to a decision, it's not going to be an action-packed barn burner. He's either going to wait for his good shot and get a crazy KO out of anywhere, or it's going to be a bit of a snoozer. So I'm going to put Jan Blachowicz, not a snoozer, a good... I have to be critical. He is not boring. These guys aren't boring. These guys aren't boring. These guys aren't boring. Just where they have to go in comparison to these fucking guys. You know what I'm saying? Jan Blachowicz, entertaining enough to be in this fucking video in the first place, which is good. It's just if there's not a KO, the Jacare Souza fight... Even the Brazilian crowd were booing Jacare in that one. They couldn't even keep it in. Jan Blachowicz, I mean, sometimes a bit of a snoozer. Sometimes really great fights, great performances, great KOs. Recently really good. I'm putting him at C tier. He's in the fucking video. Moving on to someone else who is... Michael Chandler, B tier. From what we've seen of him so far, all blood and guts, goes out there blasting for big shots, looking for finishes straight away. Really explosive fighter, always looking to scrap and get back in there. Turned around the fight against Oliveira when he had his back taken and started putting it on Oliveira and beating the shit out of him. First round crazy KO over Dan Hooker. So far, from the limited amount of time we've seen Chandler in the UFC, amazing performances. And even at Bellator, great KO wins over there as well. I'll include some of that evidence. Great KO wins at Bellator, great KO wins in the UFC, and great fights even when he loses in the UFC as well. Michael Chandler, B tier. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Petr Yan. I'm putting him at A tier. The Terminator. Walks down fighters, always entertaining, never in a boring fight. Sometimes it can get a little bit stale if someone's shooting on him. Like the John Dodson fight wasn't the most entertaining in the world, but still good. The Aljamain Sterling fight, it was entertaining to watch towards the end, but in that second round, it got a little bit stale. We was just looking to grab Aljo and slow him down and get into those later rounds. I like Petr Yan. He's just not always in every round looking like a savage, like he's going to kill you, but he's definitely good in every fight, so I'm putting him at A tier. Great stuff. Petr Yan's got one of the most interesting styles to watch in the UFC. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Israel Adesanya. I'm putting him at C tier here. Israel Adesanya, let's be real. Good fights if his opponent is absolutely terrible and runs into the shots and gets KO'd. Great war with Kelvin Gastelum. Don't get me wrong. Great war with Kelvin Gastelum. If Israel Adesanya finishes you, it's going to be a great performance. Same with Jan Blachowicz, I feel like, with Israel Adesanya. But if Israel Adesanya doesn't finish you and doesn't get a KO in the first 2 rounds, he's probably just going to sit on the outside and leg kick you. And that's what he does anyway until the KOs. Against Paulo Costa, he literally just shimmied away on the outside, leg kicked, then went for a finish when he thought it was necessary. Israel Adesanya, good. It's just only in certain sparks and moments of fights, not throughout the duration of the fight. Like, I feel like Israel Adesanya Romero is just... it's unacceptable. We watched Zhang versus Jędrzejczyk and then went to that shit afterwards. And it was such a comparison. It was crazy. I can't put him above B tier or even in B tier. Israel Adesanya at C tier. A little bit too safety first. Just outstrikes his opponent by like 5-10 significant strikes every round. Good fighter. Just nothing crazy entertaining recently in his career anyway. Moving on up the list to another fighter who is Islam Makhachev. Putting him at D tier here. Not just because he's a grappler. In all honesty, I actually like grappling in a sport. I thought him versus Arman Tsarukyan could have got fight of the night. It was a great grappling contest and nothing but grappling, and it was a great time to watch. Islam Makhachev, though, he just seems to hold people against a cage, hold himself against a cage while he's landing knees, stick at range, throw some shots to just warn people off a little bit before he eventually goes for his takedown. Half guard simulator for a bit against Drew Dober. 2 rounds of nothing and just control time on top until eventually getting a 3rd round submission. Islam Makhachev, good fighter, has his moments of excitement. The KO against Gleison Tibau. These guys have got their finishes in their career as well. Has some moments of excitement within fights as well. Just no crazy war. But entertaining to watch. But just D tier for Islam Makhachev. It's a bit of a drab sometimes, in all honesty. Moving on to someone else who's going to be Beneil Dariush. Putting him at C tier. If he gets a finish on you out of nowhere, it can be crazy. Same situation. A lot of these guys have similar situations, which is why I've placed them with each other. Beneil Dariush, if he gets a KO on you, crazy. Amazing. Gets a submission on you, even better. Great stuff. Beneil Dariush is so entertaining, it's great. If he doesn't get that on you, he's probably just going to grind you out and half-guard simulator you for the rest of the fucking fight. That's what he did against Tony Ferguson. He did it a bit against Thiago Moises, but he was a little bit more active with the volume. I just can't. I would like to put him in B tier. I think that's where he maybe belongs. The Tony Ferguson fight lowered him down a bit, in my opinion. But very exciting fighter. Deserves to be on the list for sure. Putting him in this area. A little bit stinky, but when the finish comes, it gets great. Beneil Dariush in the C tier section. Moving on to someone else who is Jorge Masvidal. Putting him at B tier. Great fights, great scraps. Makes things entertaining all the time. Always shows up to be ready to fight. Sometimes he has some stinky performances against Damian Maia. Wonderboy kind of shut him down. He didn't really try and go for it as much as he should have done. Kind of accepted losing a decision loss there. Even against Darren Till, he'll be the one to shoot a takedown first and get things to the ground and just give himself some time in a scrap. Even against Nate Diaz, when things are getting a little bit scrappy and back and forth, Masvidal would just clinch up, hold Diaz against a cage for a little bit and just hold him there for about 2 minutes of a round before he had his energy to be explosive again. I think Jorge Masvidal at B tier is where he belongs. Good, exciting fighter. Other than the Ben Askren knee, good performances. Good KOs here and there. Decent scraps. I'm putting him at B tier. Moving on to someone else who is Stipe Miocic. I'm putting him at C tier. Chances of KOs, chances of comeback wins, chances of decent wars back and forth, like against JDS. That was a great scrap. Other than that, putting him at C tier. It's hard for heavyweights to entertain him too much, and I don't think he has that one-punch KO power that maybe he did during his prime, that you're waiting on every single fight. I feel like with Stipe Miocic, the Daniel Cormier trilogy fight wasn't the most entertaining fight in the world, let's be real. Other than that, the first DC fight he lost by KO, the second DC fight was a great scrap back and forth. I'm putting Stipe Miocic at C tier. I just feel like he's lost a bit of a step. Even against Ngannou, he's being patient, playing on the outside. In the later rounds against Ngannou in the first fight, he didn't really have that crazy, entertaining performance. I'm just splitting hairs here. Miocic at C tier. Moving on to someone else who is Jiri Prochazka. S tier for Jiri. From what we've seen so far, and from all of his fights at Rising as well, by the way, if you haven't seen them, go and check them out. I'm going to fart right now. That's how excited I am. Either way, Jiri Prochazka. I'm going to loudly make noises over the other farts. We're good. Jiri Prochazka, amazing fighter. Always entertaining to watch. Always amazingly entertaining to watch. Really, really fun style at all times. I love Jiri Prochazka, man. Every single fight, he can be getting hit by KO blows. Who gives a fuck? I'm charging towards you. Oh, Reyes, you're timing me perfectly with pivot left hands. Oh, cool, I'm going to charge towards you again. That's all it is. There's no other solution. He just walks guys down and does crazy shit. And even against Volkan Ozdemir, it's the extra stuff in the cage. It's the fucking religious sign in the middle of a fucking firefight back and forth. It's the charging up of his right hand. That's another aspect of entertaining fighters, the in the middle stuff. When nothing's going on in the fight, they still make it their chore to make it somehow entertaining. If the guy's sticking on the outside, not exchanging with them in the pocket, they're doing something crazy with their hands, they're doing some crazy footwork stuff, putting their fucking hand, charging it up. Other than that, moving on to someone else. Dustin Poirier, putting him at S tier as well. Consistent, and this is a volume thing. Dustin Poirier maybe has some fights where he doesn't show up too good, has a bit of a stinky performance, gets KO'd by Michael Johnson. Khabib fight, he even went for a guillotine at one point, had a moment of excitement there, had a moment where he rocked Khabib on the feet as well, had a great moment of excitement there. Other than that though, Dustin Poirier, this is where these other guys differ from Poirier. You can go back to Poirier's fights in the very early days of his career. They're all scraps. They're all great performances. He's looking for finishes. He's looking for TKOs. He's looking for bonuses. Every single Poirier fight is entertaining, even if it's only mildly entertaining some days on an off time. Poirier's always going to be one to watch. I'm putting Dustin Poirier at S tier. He's always going for it, always trying to make it entertaining. Moving on to someone else who is Alexander Volkanovski. We're putting him at C tier, boys. Alexander Volkanovski, great fighter, great to watch, very, very technical, had a great scrap with Chad Mendes, great fight with Darren Elkins and some other fighters as well in that featherweight division. Other than that, Aldo fight was a bit stinky. He had another bit of a stinky fight against Holloway the second time. It wasn't stinky, it just wasn't action-packed, and that's what this list benefits. I'm putting Alexander Volkanovski at C tier. Very technical, very fun to watch technically, but just occasionally doesn't really have that finishing instinct, and is more than okay to not please the crowd if it means getting his win, which automatically puts you below B or A tier or S tier as well. Moving on to someone else, an opponent of his. Brian Ortega, who's coming up soon as an opponent. I'm putting Brian Ortega at B tier. Entertaining fighter, always looking for a finish, always pushing forward, even in the last round against Clay Guida where he was actually losing, if you don't remember that one. Losing the fight against Clay Guida, went for the finish because he knew he had to, gets the bonus for it. I think Brian Ortega, even against a Korean zombie in a very technical fight, he made it entertaining, he's got great footwork. Not quite wowing enough to be in the A tier section, or like crazy enough to be in the S tier section, but I'm putting him at B tier. Consistently entertaining at all times, Brian Ortega. Moving on to someone else who is Max Blessed Holloway. Now, we good? We still good? I'm putting Max Holloway at A tier. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was kind of waiting on this one because I knew it would be a bad one, and maybe you wouldn't. Maybe people that would have disliked have already left. I'm putting Holloway at A tier, man. I'm sorry. There seems to be a consensus in Holloway fights. Don't get me wrong, the majority of them are always entertaining. He has some great wars and amazing performances that you've never seen before, like against Calvin Kattar and against Brian Ortega. But in between those, the Edgar fight, where it's a bit tricky for him. Snoozy. You know what I mean? A little bit. That's where these other guys at the S tier level don't make it boring, even against tough matchups. They go for it anyway. Edgar's giving Holloway some issues. He just kind of cruises and picks at him and makes his little moments happen. Against Volkanovski twice. I hate it as well, and this kind of degrades him from S to A tier. These guys would never do this. These guys would never do this in a fight. They would never allow themselves to give up in the later rounds of a fight and not push where they need to for a finish and pray that a judge will be on their side for a decision. It was very obviously clear that Holloway had lost rounds 3, 4, and 5 against Volkanovski, and instead of going for Volkanovski in the 5th round and looking for a finish, what did Holloway do? I'll see if the judges gave it to me. I didn't like that too much. Tried to get the judges on his side. He even thought he won the first Volkanovski fight, which is interesting because I could see all of those rounds going to Volk other than maybe one of them. Either way, Max Holloway, great performances, amazing ones in his career that puts him at A tier, but against Jeremy Stephens. If you remember that fight, a little bit stinky. Don't get me wrong, when Holloway's better than his opponent by far, he's amazing. But when it's close, when it's competitive, when the opponent might be better than him, that's where he loses that savage to go out there and just push through anyway, like these top guys over here in the S tier section do. I'm putting Holloway at A tier. Moving on to someone else who is Darren Till. I'm putting him at D tier for Darren. Let's be real. He's really boring to watch recently. Really exciting. No, hang on. Really cool to watch. Really high fight IQ. Really great technique. Amazing to study as a fan of mixed martial arts. But in the most entertaining fighters tier list, he don't fucking scrape the fucking bottom of the barrel. Like, he's lucky he's in the fucking video. Because he makes good IG memes, I've put him on here. But, it's just real low output. And again, as I said about Holloway, but more so the case for Till, at least Holloway maybe could have believed he won some of those rounds against Volkanovski, especially the first two in the rematch as well. With Darren Till, there's no way he beat Whittaker. And he has his hands up at the end, and he doesn't push because he doesn't want to and doesn't want to risk it. Against Kelvin Gastelum, really close fight. Got the decision win. Snooze fest. Really bad snooze fest against Kelvin Gastelum. Either way, Woodley. Title fight with Woodley. Darren Till out there. Big moment in his career. Time to make something happen against Woodley. He's the favourite against Woodley. Doesn't throw a punch until he gets KO'd. For a whole first round. Championship fight. Doesn't even throw anything. You got to put him at D tier. Good guy. Fun guy to listen to. Fights get a bit shit because I don't think he has the cojones to make it interesting. Moving on to someone else who is Derrick Lewis. I'm going to put Derrick Lewis at C tier. The only thing saving him from D tier is that random KO ability that he has. Oh, you know what? Oh, we're doing this with Derrick Lewis. He can't be with these guys. He can't be with these guys. I think... I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Every single fight until he gets a KO is, oh, what the fuck is he doing? Oh, this is shit. What a shit fight this is. Nothing going on again. Lewis just... Oh! Then it's a KO out of nowhere. I'm putting Derrick Lewis at D tier. I can't put him here. This is the problem with the fucking tier lists, man. There ain't enough fucking tiers or space on my fucking screen. I'm putting Derrick Lewis like this. Sorry. Moving on. Stephen Thompson, we're putting him here as well. Entertaining, fun, has some wars here and there like Volkanovski does against Mendes and Adesanya does against Gastelum. Other than that, he's just going to be a little bit better than you. He has some of his boring fights like against Darren Till where there's little to no output whatsoever and he just prays that the judges saw it for him because he doesn't want to go out there and make it a scrap and really put his stamp on it. I'm putting Wonderboy at C tier. Fun to watch, amazing to watch technically. It's actually a treat to watch him fight. Doesn't really have the finishing instinct normally, but has some great scraps in his career against Luque as well. But just in between those fights like against Luque and against the other fights in his career where he's had some decent scraps, it just seems to be him scooting around, not really doing too much, but outpointing his opponent. Stephen Thompson at C tier. Moving on to the last guy on the list. Oh, is it? Oh, no. Sean O'Malley. This is to solidify the dislikes. Am I wrong? I've watched a couple of his fights recently. I know he lost to Marlon Vera because he pulled out the way of a leg kick beautifully. And as he pulled out of the way of that leg kick, Marlon Vera's toe grazed with his open perennial nerve as he was lifting his foot in just the correct way to reveal that perennial nerve perfectly for Marlon Vera's toe, meaning that he dead his leg and he rolled his ankle afterwards and injured himself and eventually went down. I get that that happened. He's playing fucking basketball in the cage. I don't care. He's S tier. He's literally, in my opinion, I'll say this. Sean O'Malley is the UFC's version of a volume-based MVP. Can crush him, maybe. Doesn't fight the best competition, maybe, but MVP's doing that now, I guess. Sean O'Malley is literally a volume-based MVP. He'll do crazy shit out there, dribble in between his legs between the middle of a fucking combination, will kick every single time. I don't want that fucking KO, it's not good enough. That's what we're talking about here. Most entertaining fighter. I think O'Malley belongs in S tier. I can't put him down here. Do these guys see a KO and go, not good enough? No, they don't. O'Malley does. I'm putting him at S tier. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Fuck me, it's been 43 minutes. Hope you enjoyed that tier list video. I missed out Mikel Pereira. Bye. This is why I hate doing the tier lists. I fucking hate these dumb fucking tier lists. Fuck these tier lists. Stop fucking asking me to do them. I'm done!